Advanced Game Intelligence. In this module, we'll cover what is game intelligence, how does game intelligence help officials, what are key elements of game intelligence, and how can we improve game intelligence. Often kind of referred to as hockey sense or knowing the game. There's really no right or wrong answers to what this means to an individual, but there's a few things that kind of tie it all together. The ability to make the right decision most of the time, the ability to feel confident in your decision making, the ability to feel comfortable in unpredictable or uncomfortable situations. So why is game intelligence important for officials? As officials, we are reading and reacting to the play. The better we understand how players think and what they're trying to accomplish, the easier it is for us to perform our role. Game intelligence affects our positioning, our procedural adjustments, teamwork and communication, our sight lines, and our ability to make calls. This can also help us to be somewhat proactive and provide opportunities to anticipate and be ahead of things that may happen during the hockey game. We do have some examples of game intelligent characteristics or elements coming up. As we go through those, your job is to think how you would define and explain the significance of the situation and think how these ideas affect our role as officials. Try to think not only from the perspective of yourself, but from the perspective of other officials, players, and coaches as well. So the first element is influence. Why is this important for officials? How does this affect our game? The degree to which you can affect someone else's behavior without being in charge or directing someone to do so is influence. Officials are given responsibility for keeping the game safe and fair, but they aren't really in charge of the game. The players are the ones who decide what will happen next. How can officials influence the game, and what tools are available? So some things to think about as a referee. Communication is a big part with the influence on players and how they react on the ice. Sometimes it's affirmation and communicating during the play. Good hit, good play, good job keeping the hands down. Things like that that can influence them to kind of stay on that path or continue to play within a fair and safe manner. As a lines person, it might be things like, again, communication between the whistles or during the play or while you're near the bench, and communicating with players on situations that may be kind of a red flag or something that got the attention of the officials. Another one for lines persons is likely anticipation is a big part of the influence. Knowing our hot spots can kind of lead us to taking charge of some situations and being proactive and having influence on the outcome of the situation in a hockey game. The next one we're going to look at is impact non-calls. So obviously everybody is quite familiar with impact calls and things like that at this level. Why are impact non-calls important for officials? How does this affect our game? Again, these are likely things that don't show up on the score sheet, but have just as big of an impact on the game as impact calls or the calls that were made. Like impact penalties, impact non-calls are decisions that have a greater effect on the game, either because of the nature of the call or the situation of the game. At the elite level, non-calls can be just as impactful as penalty calls. And like impact penalties, the effect can be positive or negative. So we've often heard from several league directors of officials, they often have the message in the playoffs, no soft calls. So understanding, the difference between somebody's head snapping back and when we needed a call um, are important impact non-calls and things to review. Again, we can encourage good hard plays, um, and ultimately we don't want to penalize somebody for making a good, fair, legal play in hockey, um, and which has an impact on the game. So we want to focus on the impact of non-calls as well. The next one is the game state. Again, why is this important for officials? And how does this affect our game? Things to consider. The game state is the situation surrounding the gameplay that affect how the teams approach the game. Often we describe aspects, game states, with terms like momentum, or the game state is affected by elements like when the game occurs in the season. So if it's a playoff game, do we understand the different temperature, different emotions in that? Where the game is played, sometimes teams play different on the road or at home or even in a neutral site game. And the score of the game often has an impact on how players react throughout the game. But it's also affected by elements like who scored last, who has more hits, things like that. Sometimes in sports we describe this as momentum. So with this, a simple example is just knowing the time of the game or the situations when a goalie may be pulled for a delayed penalty or a team is late in the game, or understanding the situation after no change icing and a team is out on the ice and they're tired, and who are they putting in for the face-off? Is it their regular center or is it somebody that they're sending in to um, intentionally get ejected from a face-off? Knowing when a possible timeout situation is and making sure we've got good communication and eye contact with the bench or the coach on the bench that may be making that. Understanding it might be a situation where a player is playing against a former team or former teammates. Understanding things like the score might affect a team might start doing more stretch passes. We don't want to get caught out of position. Understanding a power play or a penalty kill setup and the breakouts for each team to allow the players to compete and do what they've been trained to do. Another element is venue knowledge. Why is this important for officials? How does this affect our game? Venue knowledge includes anything about the venue that might affect our execution and/or our performance. This includes things like the size of the ice, but also the angle of the boards, the space between the goal line, the location of the bench and penalty bench or boxes, the type of lighting in the building. This is critical in a short-term competition because the official who can best manage and adjust to unfamiliarity will be successful. So again, some things, where are the doors when teams are the two doors near each other on both benches when they're making line changes? Do we have to be aware of players crossing over and in front of each other? How do the teams enter and exit the ice? When they leave the ice after a period, do we need to manage those situations? They're all going through the same door. Understanding the ice conditions. Is it heavy snow, lots of water on the ice, um, and we're playing, and that could lead to more turnovers and things like that. So, are the boards and the glass along the end zones the same height? So we're watching if pucks are put out of play or a goaltender shoots the puck out of play. Things like that. That a venue, we're all familiar with our home rinks and rinks we've been to before, but reviewing some of those things prior to the game is a key part to increasing our game intelligence. Another aspect to think about challenging personalities. Again, why is this important for officials? How does this affect our game? We might refer to these people as problem players or something a little less kind even, but also could include coaches or other officials. Every challenging personality is different and will require us to address them differently. We talk a lot about how we react to challenging personalities, but we also need to identify the challenging personalities, especially in a short-term competition. Again, this might include just getting some info from officials that have worked the team prior. Do we have a game plan coming in with how we plan to communicate? If we come in with and have that, give off that perception, we're fair and willing to communicate, it's probably a good starting point. But what are some of the other things that work for you as an official to deal with some of these challenging personalities? Discussion with the group is always a positive thing, but game intelligence is also a personal skill that needs to be built and maintained. So for yourself, consider the following. What was new information or gave you a new way of thinking with some of this game intelligence discussion? What are you already executing but could improve on? Do you have recent experience where you lack game intelligence, and how could you approach those things differently?